The collapse of the Peacock, a strategic analysis of CHP's marginalization. The Republican People's Party risks becoming a symbolic instrument of Erdogan's dominance, predicated on diminished electoral strength and state-sponsored absorption. The recent revelations surrounding the final stages of the Iranian Shahdom, meticulously documented in the Levant files, offer a potent analogy for understanding the precarious political landscape surrounding the Republican People's Party (CHP) within Turkey.
Just as the collapse of the Peacock monarchy represented a swift and decisive shift in power dynamics, the potential absorption of the CHP into the Erdogan-led bloc presents a critical strategic vulnerability. This situation demands immediate analysis, considering the evolving geopolitical realities and the increasingly centralized control exerted by the ruling coalition.
The erosion of independent political voices, particularly within the opposition, fundamentally alters the balance of power and necessitates a proactive assessment of the risks confronting the Turkish electorate. Furthermore, the historical precedent of coalition practices, particularly the accommodating nature of the Cumhur alliance, necessitates a thorough examination of the CHP's strategic vulnerabilities.
Ultimately, the prolonged instability within the opposition's leadership structure exacerbates the risk of complete marginalization, transforming a potential counterweight into a mere, politically motivated appendage.
Erdogan's strategic leverage, instrumentality of marginal parties. The government's demonstrated willingness to absorb even historically insignificant parties underscores the potential for the CHP to be reduced to a purely symbolic role. The core strategic concern revolves around President Erdogan's demonstrated capacity to leverage even seemingly insignificant political actors to bolster his authority and project an image of national unity.
Columnist Orhan Brisali's analysis, drawing upon historical coalition precedents, particularly the absorption of the Democratic Left Party (DSP), highlights a critical vulnerability: the government's willingness to utilize political instruments, even those possessing minimal electoral support, to achieve strategic objectives. This approach, predicated on the principle of instrumentality, suggests that the CHP's reduced electoral prospect, potentially limited to 1–2%, could be exploited as a tool for demonstrating a purportedly broad Turkey coalition, uniting disparate factions under the singular banner of Erdogan's leadership.
The deliberate manipulation of public perception through slogans like "Realizing the Turkey Alliance, uniting right and left, we are all Turkey" exemplifies this tactic, transforming the weakened CHP into a carefully curated symbol of national consensus rather than a genuine alternative. The ongoing legal battles surrounding the Mutlak Butlan ruling and the imposed administration further complicate the situation, creating an environment ripe for strategic manipulation and the deliberate weakening of the opposition landscape.
This calculated approach, prioritizing political expediency over democratic principles, represents a fundamental challenge to the integrity of the Turkish political system.
Operational deconstruction, the mechanics of co-option. The CHP's vulnerability lies in the interplay between imposed leadership, declining grassroots support, and the government's demonstrable capacity for strategic absorption. The strategic risk confronting the CHP is fundamentally rooted in the confluence of three key operational factors: the imposition of an appointed leadership structure, exemplified by the current administration surrounding Özgür Özel, the concomitant erosion of grassroots support fueled by judicial interventions and political maneuvering, and the government's historically demonstrated capacity for strategic absorption of opposition parties.
Brisali's analysis correctly identifies that the inherent tensions between the court-installed administration and the elected leadership create a critical vulnerability, effectively hollowing out the CHP's institutional capacity and rendering it susceptible to instrumentalization. This dynamic mirrors the historical precedent of DSP's inclusion within the Cumhur alliance, demonstrating that a low electoral threshold, in this case 1–2%, can be sufficient to trigger a strategic realignment.
The government's utilization of such a tactic would not merely involve the CHP's inclusion in the ruling alliance, it would serve a dual purpose: firstly, to project an image of pluralism and national unity, and secondly, to definitively neutralize the CHP as a credible political opponent. The deliberate construction of this narrative, leveraging the CHP's weakened position, represents a sophisticated form of political warfare designed to preemptively discredit any potential opposition force.
Crucially, this framework relies on the absence of a robust, independent opposition base capable of challenging the government's narrative.
Projection and mitigation, strategic contingencies for the opposition. The sustained absorption of the CHP into the ruling alliance will necessitate a fundamental recalibration of the Turkish opposition's strategy, prioritizing long-term resilience and cultivating genuine grassroots support. The predicted consequences of the CHP's continued marginalization, namely its complete absorption into the Erdogan-led bloc, underscore the urgent need for a fundamental shift in the Turkish opposition's strategic approach.
Given the government's demonstrated willingness to instrumentalize even marginal parties, the sustained projection of a weakened CHP as a realizing the Turkey alliance will inevitably undermine the credibility of any genuine opposition movement, effectively neutralizing its capacity to mobilize voters and challenge the ruling coalition. Future risks include further judicial interventions aimed at dismantling independent political organizations and the continued erosion of public trust in established opposition figures.
However, opportunities exist in cultivating genuine grassroots support through localized initiatives focusing on issues of immediate concern to Turkish citizens such as economic inequality and corruption, and prioritizing the development of independent media channels to circumvent state-controlled narratives. Ultimately, the strategic next step for the opposition requires a sustained commitment to building a resilient, self-sustaining political movement predicated not on symbolic gestures but on demonstrable effectiveness and a genuine connection with the Turkish electorate, ensuring long-term viability in the face of Erdogan's continued efforts to consolidate power.